Welcome to the official retirement video for my main account, meaning Barrett5, from Fulltime Online Daily Racing on Gran Turismo Sport. By full-time racing, I mean, obviously I don't do every race that's offered every day in the daily races, but pretty much I'm meaning I'm gonna do maybe a few types of races, and that's it now. I know I've said before I was kind of going to do the reverse. I was going to do more types of racing and then just not care about driver rating and sportsmanship rating anymore. And I've attempted to do that, but that's even less fun than attempting to do the races I'm best at. Because honestly, the penalty system is just so broken, it takes all the fun out of racing now. And now that I've made an alternate account, I'm good enough with that in the sense of the class I'm in, where I can still drive up from the penalty system messing me up. But stuff like this is proof that at a higher class, I'm just not good enough to compete with this penalty system anymore. And I really don't feel like being a backmarker every race. I actually like competition. I like racing with other cars. And the penalty system as of now just does not allow that. So here's an explanation more in details with specific examples of why I'm retiring my main account from full-time racing, quote-unquote, full-time. This first example is from an FIA race. This actually isn't from a daily race, but I'm also retiring pretty much completely from the FIA races with my main account because, well, stuff like this. As I've said before in other videos, in FI races, I'm aware that that's where the majority of people go, so therefore it's overall better crop of drivers because a lot of them don't do the daily races anymore, which makes sense. I can see exactly why. But nonetheless, that gets better competition in FI races. So if me being top class, meaning A+, and attempted to get S, but I gave up pretty quickly, and this is one of the reasons why, I get paired with the fastest drivers there are, so therefore I'm pretty much near the back. I'm not an alien, and I'm okay with that, and I'm aware of that, so that's not the complaint here. The complaint with this is, well, I'll show y'all. As of now, I'm just carrying on my merry way. I qualified 13th, I'm 14th right now. I can get into why I got the pretty much 7 seconds penalty if you want me to, but I'd rather not for mental sanity. Because that's not actually even the big deal here. The big deal is what's to come. As y'all can see, I'm giving that driver plenty of room. I'm aware that tire wear is not as good now, so I know that everybody doesn't know exactly what the car is going to do as their tires wear down, just because it's hard to know exactly. So I'm giving more room than I did the first lap or two, and so far that seems to be working out. That driver's taking a higher line, so I'm on the lower line, so everything's looking good as of now. At this point, I'm thinking that driver's pretty much just going to go about here, and then I'll continue the clip, meaning maybe 2 tires off the track in that red bit, but mostly on the tarmac. So that's where I position my car to avoid that. I have my car swinging to where I'm taking more of a line like this, while he's going to take a line like this. Like I'm doing this, he's doing this. So therefore, we shouldn't hit each other. But no, that car gets loose because it goes a little bit too wide, and no one's fault there. That driver just went slightly too wide and either clipped the wall or got to where there wasn't grip left or something, I don't exactly know. But nonetheless, spins into me. As of now, not that big a deal. I didn't cause that wreck, and that other driver just spun out on their own accord, so that slows me down slightly, but at this point, feel more sorry for that driver than anything, so whatever. Moving on, at this point, that's not that big of a deal for me. The other driver may be thinking differently, but the worst is yet to come, folks, for both drivers involved with that. I couldn't do anything about being involved with that, but as of now, I came out of that better, obviously. And you would think that's the way that continues, wouldn't you? Because I had no part in that wreck. I did not cause that whatsoever. But no, I get a 5-second penalty for that. Granted, that driver probably lost more than 5 seconds for spinning out, but I didn't cause that spin out. So why I got penalized there, I have no idea. And again, I have no control over that either. There was nothing I could have done differently there, given I didn't know that driver was going to spin. If I could predict the future, then maybe I could have done something different, but that's quite literally impossible. So therefore, that penalty should quite literally not happen. But yet it does, and insult to injury to the other driver, because that other driver still gets a 1 second penalty for that. I don't know why either of those penalties occurred, but nonetheless they did, and this still is not the worst part. I'm continuing on at this point, because honestly at this junction I wasn't even going to save this clip. I was maybe just going to save the race in general, and then maybe go back to this to put it in a compilation. But it didn't deserve its own thing yet. But I'll just continue playing the clip, because there's a point in which, well, wait for it folks, I move forward. There's a reason for that, because y'all noticed that jump in terms of where the track was, like this was going on to the last turn, and then now midway through the front straight. Well, during that time, the penalty in which I had was going up. As y'all saw when I went before the clip jumped, it was at an 11 point something second penalty. Now it's at a 13 second penalty. So, once I started seeing that penalty going up, I saved to prove that it was going up. So that way I remembered it and actually made sure to make it as its own point. But that's even still not the worst part about it. As I saved to show that that in and of itself was a penalty, so therefore that bit in which I was saving the clip was actually cut off, that bit of the track, because where it's an online race, my car continued to drive. The penalty also still went up. So at this point, I'm not even anywhere close to at speed. In the middle of the front straight, so pretty much in the middle of the track, with a 13 second penalty to delete that was initially caused by something I had no control over. So guess what? Because the penalty is going up, that means I have to sit in the middle of a live racing track, which in and of itself is downright stupid, to delete a penalty I didn't deserve in the first place. And the rest of that race, I pretty much just drove around in last for the rest of the time for something that I had no control over whatsoever. I'm not having that. I'm really not. I'm not going to drive around in last for something I didn't cause, especially in an FIA race where it's meant to be competitive. There's meant to be the ones where people are racing the hardest, so therefore there may be a few taps here and there. Therefore there may be a spin here and there. But everyone was racing clean, no one deserved a penalty in any of that, and yet that completely ruined my race for something I can't control. I'm not having that, and there's even more than just that here. Continuing on. This is the final lap of a race that I'm gonna go ahead and say I'm pretty cotton picking good at. It's Tokyo Expressway Central Outer Loop. All in all, it's probably my best track, and I'm pretty good with Group 4s. So all in all, I managed to have, I think it was like the second fastest time in America when it was all said and done and the event ended. Or maybe it was third by then. I think it actually was third. But nonetheless, third in America. So it's the end of the race here. I wasn't quite at the fastest qualifying time, but y'all get what I'm saying here. I'm pretty fast here. I think it's fair to say I know what I'm doing here. So it's the final lap. I try to race nice the entire race in general, because I know the penalty system is stupid, given that this happened after the previous race I saw by a few days. And I already have a penalty anyway, because of course I do. 1 second penalty is not that big a deal, especially when the front driver also has a penalty. So, I'll say to start out with this clip, notice the placement of both of our cars, and I'll continue on for a little bit. We're both in the right lane, still both in the right lane. I have speed on that driver, so to avoid hitting that driver, I decide to go wide, because, I mean, as of now, that driver's giving me that lane, so that seems like the fair thing to do. I don't think I'd really be able to make a pass on the outside, but I also know I can't really bump draft, because that would be a penalty. So that's pretty much my choice here, is to go to the outside. So, I do that. I pretty noticeably go to the outside. I'm not really gradually doing it. I probably already moved about half a car length in a second. But then that driver gradually goes to the outside. as I'm doing it pretty quickly. Meaning that may have been a block by that driver. Granted, it's the last lap, and I completely understand why. Going too wide into this particular turn with this stupid of a penalty system is only going to cause a wreck, more likely than not. But initially, that driver was giving me room, so I thought that was going to be how it's going to continue, so I was going to drive to make it not a wreck. If I needed to back out, I would have, but if I could have made the pass, I would have tried to. But nonetheless, that driver blocked all of that from happening in the first place. But that's still not the worst of it. I can deal with blocking on the last lap to win a race. That's fair enough. That's not at all what I'm mad about here. What I'm mad about here is I get blocked, and wait for it, folks. Y'all probably already know what's coming. I get a penalty for it. I was the one that got blocked, and I got the bigger penalty for it. Granted, that driver sort of ruined their own race by doing that because they also got a penalty, but that may have actually deserved a penalty on that driver's part. I don't really mind blocking at the end of the races. I don't really consider it all that dirty because it happens in many a racing type sport. Even if it's not necessarily car racing, there's still blocking that involves racing. Even if it's like skiing or snowboarding or whatever, people block in many types of races when it's about to end. That's a thing that happens. And sometimes things go wrong, meaning wrecks and all that. But neither of us wrecked. All in all, it still went pretty smoothly. But the penalty system said, no, screw y'all. We're going to ruin both of your races because PD logic. Seriously. I just proved it on camera there. I had room initially where I could go completely on the outside and fit my car there. Would it have worked? Who knows? Because that driver blocked it from happening at all. And because that driver blocked it, both of our races got ruined for it, even though neither of us wrecked. I can't deal with that. I really can't. This is a track that I'm not sounding all that humble here, but I think it's fair to say I know what I'm doing here. And I figured that was going to work if that driver let it work. But that driver didn't even let the situation happen at all. But yet we still both got penalized for it. I got a lot more of a penalty for it. So I think that driver noticed it because it comes up on both of our screens when we both get a penalty. And that driver actually let me by. There was even actually slight contact there because I was not expecting that driver to let me by. I didn't get a penalty for that, neither did that driver, as it should be. The penalty system is right when it doesn't actually matter. There's slight contact when that driver is purposely letting me around because of the previous situation. And that's when they get it right. It's only when you're doing something that's not to be expected at all is when the game seems to even attempt to get the penalty system right. And actual racing, doing as if racing should be, in terms of racing hard on the last lap, no, the penalty system screws that bit up completely. So at this point, continuing on, maybe that driver is going to let me go ahead and get it, because, obviously, that situation shouldn't have really happened in the first place, meaning the penalties coming out of it. That's fair enough. Like I said, I may have blocked in that same situation as well. But I'll give props to that driver because it seemed like that was the point there. That driver was letting me by. But nonetheless, I still have that big of a penalty to delete. And so I do that. But at this point, something else to point out is now there's another driver involved from us two battling and both having to delete penalties that wasn't involved with all of this to begin with. So, okay, we were pretty much running away with the top two at one point, and we were having a fair and relatively clean battle, given the circumstances. And both of our races are pretty much ruined from that now. We both have to slow down, we both have penalties, and that pretty much gets it to where the third place driver is just in the mess as well. And guess what? Also has a penalty that has to be deleted. Two drivers racing pretty fair with each other given the circumstances. And honestly, I was the one who would have been on the quote-unquote unfair end, but I would have done the same thing, so I'm not really counting that as dirty. I got more of a penalty than anyone there, and that still ended up messing up a third driver in that by the end of the race, for us two being pretty caught and picking clean. At least I still finished second that race, because given when that clip started, I may have been second to begin with, but the SR dropped that race. Not that big a deal, because again, I don't really care that much, but still, that happened. If the penalty system would have worked as it should, at the very most, penalizing the other driver, but it would have been best to not penalize either. Nobody would have had an SR drop that race, and third wouldn't have got involved as well. But no. Continuing on, at least I got the position that I started in that race. I'm going to say that. I'm going to say that right now. Because this is the final straw, and this is what kills it for me. The other things makes me very iffy, but the whole reason that I did another race after this is because my SR went down. So I actually practiced enough to get a higher qualifying time, which that in of itself took real time in the real world to do. So I put in a better qualifying time so I could maybe have a chance to run away from all the chaos to begin with. And as y'all can tell here, that didn't happen. This is later on. And it's getting pretty near the end of the race now. It's still plenty of time where you could, in theory, race clean and not really try to pass yet. But I'm not really going to blame either of these drivers for going side by side, because they're doing it cleanly. I don't think I would have tried to pass yet, because I know how stupid the penalty system is, but whatever, fair enough. Can't really fault them if they're doing it clean. So everything's actually still going fine now. I think there actually was slight contact there, so that's going to be a 10-second penalty for both of those drivers. But as of now, I'm neither of those drivers, so I can't really complain. That very slight contact will probably make them both lose the race, and I'm in third, so in theory I benefit from that. But it sort of seems like they're both going a bit slow there. I don't know if that means that they just now got a penalty and are trying to decide if they want to delete it, or if that just means they made a little bit of contact there and they're just like being leery or whatever. They're just taking it easy to not cause a big wreck. But nonetheless, they both get checked up to the point of, there's one of two things I can do at this point. I can try to fit through the middle there. Do y'all think that would work? I don't, so I didn't do it. So I slowed down as much as I really could there. As y'all can see, I'm already off the throttle. So I'm pretty much just having to go on the brakes in the middle of the straights, because I realized if I were to go full speed, that would be a penalty. Even though, realistically, that's probably what would happen in real racing, is you probably would go pretty full speed, given that bump drafting is a thing that happens in the real world. So I just barely even tapped that driver by the time I got slowed down. And really, I did it sort of strategically as well, because if I would have just slowed down completely, one, they might have just ran away, or two, what probably would have happened is I would have been side by side with the driver, well, on the side of me right now. So I wanted to carry a little bit more momentum than that, just so I could get by and not be too wide into the previous turn that I sold in the previous clip. Now, I knew it was going to be wrecked to begin with, and that's why I was being cautious, which caused the penalty in the previous clip. We're going into that turn again, and this time I'm on the inside instead of the outside, but yet, it's still a penalty. Wait for it, folks, it hasn't gone up yet. It's still a penalty for both drivers again. Again, nothing I can do about it, and especially nothing that front driver could do about it. Those two drivers are going side by side with pretty much the same speed on a 2-lane track. That driver couldn't have slowed down, or I would have just hit that driver harder. And obviously, the other driver isn't going to slow down either, because they're in the middle of a race. I couldn't have slowed down anymore. I couldn't have, I guess theoretically, I could have just e-braked it and just completely wrecked myself to avoid the other drivers. Or, in my opinion, I did the most sensible thing, slowed down as much as I could, gave that other driver enough of a tap to where I could get clear of the driver right beside me, so we could all go one by one into a turn that you shouldn't really take too wide. But no, it's still a penalty anyway, and that's still not the worst part, by far. I may have not even sold this clip at this point, because realistically that screwed both of us up, so it probably would have just gone into compilation. If it was just me, then maybe, but I don't know. Because, well, I don't know what would have happened if what happens up next didn't. But anyway, this is what's about to happen. I guess I need to go back a little bit here. And again, the strategy that I took here was I tapped that front driver just enough to where I had enough momentum to get clear by that driver who was beside me. That pretty much worked. At this point, I probably have like 3/4 of the car length on the other driver, and I have the inside, meaning that by the time the actual turn starts, by length of the track, I would be ahead 3/4 at this point, and less distance that I have to travel, I should be clear. But now that driver throws it in there, which is kind of that driver's fault, but given the chaos of the situation that preceded it, whatever. But I was not expecting that driver to throw it in there, is to sum it up, because I was pretty much clear and had the momentum to begin with, so that driver's gonna go in the wall there, which is gonna be a penalty for that driver. So I really wasn't expecting that driver to do that, because it screws themselves up. And at the point in which that driver hits the wall, right there, it bounces off and hits me. Y'all know what's coming at this point? Probably not, because there's a bit of a lag cannon. Would that have happened in real life? Meaning the physics there? Probably not, which that in of itself is worth note. I really don't think the other car would have just flat out gone to 0 miles an hour there. But this starts a snowball effect. I wasn't expecting that driver to go in there, so, I mean, yeah, that driver hit the wall, which was a penalty, and then I hit that driver who hit the wall, because I couldn't do anything about that, because I wasn't expecting that driver to go back in there that hard in the first place. So that driver's race is ruined, because he got inadvertently wrecked by me, because they kind of inadvertently dive bombed in there. So whose fault that really was is, well, I don't think anyone was his fault there as much as what's coming here. For whatever reason, I don't even know why. I mean, that was a penalty for me, and that's not what I'm most mad about here. I can kind of see why that's a penalty for me, given that was a hard hit. Whatever. I couldn't do anything about that one, but that was a hard hit that probably ruined that driver's race by more seconds than I got a penalty for. But this is the part, this is just downright boggles my mind coming up here in a minute. The first place driver, who has a penalty, yeah, but is at one of the most narrow and least margin for error points of the track, meaning that turn is full throttle if you can take it in a line in which you can use up the whole track. So aka you probably don't want to delete a penalty there, because it's going to mess up everyone else's lines. And that driver just slams on the brakes, giving me quite literally nowhere to go, and I wasn't really expecting that driver to delete a penalty at that point at all, because it's not really a good part of the track to do so. And especially not slam on the brakes doing it. Gradual is one thing, slamming on the brakes is another. So now, guess what happens? I hit that driver because that driver slammed on the brakes in the middle of a portion of the track, which you definitely shouldn't. That might have been a brake check. That's all I'm going to say there, is that might have been a brake check. So then now I'm actually around, because, I mean, I was just carrying way more momentum, so I should be at this point. That driver hit the brakes in the middle of a turn, and I couldn't do anything about it. So in theory, I should come out of that pretty well. For all the chaos that happened before, as of now, it's sort of looking like I came out of that the best, doesn't it? Kind of. That's a lot of penalty there, but it gets worse. But at least I wasn't wrecked, and at least I didn't slam the brakes in the middle of a straightaway. So I'm continuing on at this point, because I have a lead, and everyone else kind of got wrecked, and I'm in the lead, so maybe I can just run away and delete the penalty as the race goes, maybe, because everyone else also has a penalty as well. No, the penalty goes up, because of course the penalty goes up, and the other driver also gets a penalty, which is... y'all can make your own assumptions there. But go up, I also mean like the literal per second goes up as well. So that means I have to start deleting it immediately. Which means I do have to slam on the brakes in the middle of straightaway. But that driver who's on camera, actually not quite as on, seemed to cricket. That driver wrecked more than I thought they did. The other driver who got physics balled has already hit. But nonetheless, the TNTR driver slammed the brakes when they didn't have to delete a penalty. I have to delete this penalty because it's going up per second. And ghosting physics doesn't work there, as it didn't work previously as well. In theory, if someone's slamming the brakes in the middle of a straightaway, their car should go ghost if the ghosting physics worked as they should. But no, so that caused a pile up and a physics ball, and guess what? Also a penalty, because of course it does. That driver ahead gets penalty too, because it sort of physics ball into that wall. And that driver had no control of it either. But I had to delete the penalty there, because going up second by second, and at this point I just quit, because... Remember how I started the video saying I didn't really want to be running around in last? Yeah, that's enough penalty at this point where that's what would have happened. And this is the track that I'm quite literally third in America with. And I still would have been running around in last, because at this point I have like half a minute of penalties. This is what ended it for me. After this point, I pretty much quit. This is a track that I'm best at. And I couldn't have really done anything about any of that happened there. And that was probably a 30-second loop of events of what was happening. I couldn't do anything during any of that. And by the time it was over, I started with no penalty. I ended with 30 seconds of penalties and about 30 seconds of driving. And that was only going up unless I stopped in the middle of a racetrack. I had no control over any of that. That seems like a fair enough point to quit on, doesn't it? You get penalized per second for something you have no control over at the race that you're, in theory, fast enough to battle with the fastest in the world with. This is really about the only race in which I can say that. I still would have finished last. Nothing in my control about that. I quit. I'm not doing this full time anymore. And I'll go and say at this point, what I mean by full time is, I'll link it in the description. There's a website now that does you can find the daily race schedule a week ahead of time now. It already has that like pre-made and stuff done pretty much when that schedule comes out. So you can see ahead of time what races that you might want to do. I'll link that into the description. I'm pretty much just going to go by that. Let's say a Thursday race is a kart race at Brands Hatch Indy. Kart races are always chaotic, and I'm fast enough there where even if I do get wrecked, there's going to be enough other wrecks where maybe I could catch up. That may be when I do, and then I can see the races ahead of time. I may plan to do it. Or other races sort of kind of like that, but I'm not going to do a race just day by day. Just I see something that looks fun and do it like that anymore. I'm going to have to plan for it and see how stuff goes, and I'm not... In theory, that's how racing should work in this game, is you just see a daily race you like, and then you do it, and then all goes well, because it's a fun track and car combination. In theory. But penalties makes it so much not fun that I'm not doing it anymore. There is my alternate account, though, where I don't have to care about... Like, I literally don't have to care about driver and sportsmanship rating. Theoretically, I can just ignore it and then act like it's not there. But with the alternate account, I can literally ignore it because I'm not competing for anything with that account. So if penalties screw up my sportsmanship rating, I don't really have to care. On that account, I've probably already gotten 5 or 6 driver rating resets because of the sportsmanship rating going down. Probably at least 3 or 4 of them was no fault of my own. But I'm doing pretty much every race that looks fun to me. Not necessarily ones I'm good at, just ones that look fun. And I've gotten reset many times with the alternate account. But again, I don't really care. I'm gonna keep on using that account for pretty much a full schedule, but for my main account, no, I quit. Stuff like this, where you have to break in the middle of a straightaway to delete a penalty that you didn't deserve in the first place, it's just too much for me to take. It makes it so much not fun that I just can't do it anymore. I will give PD credit in this aspect. Some of the things they've sort of changed from the beginning of the game. The penalty system is a lot worse than the beginning of the game. But they have made the lap cars ghosted. That's good. They have made the penalties easier to delete once you get them. Kind of. It's still the same method in which to delete it. It's just quicker once you do that method. So that's good. But the penalty system, the way it is, shouldn't happen in the first place. So you shouldn't have to fix the way to delete the penalties. You should just fix the system in general. But I really don't think they've done enough to warrant me actually continuing the way I am now. It does seem like they're attempting to do stuff, just they've had way more fails than successes when changing around the penalty system. And I don't really feel like being the butt end of the system or whatever, like the one who has to deal with the consequences of the fails they do have when dealing with the penalty system. And especially in the middle of the FIA races, where if I get wrecked, I may be on the same track as some of the people who are actually trying to race real cars. I don't want to get in the way because PD had the penalty system make me get in the way. AKA meaning having to sit on the middle of the track to delete a penalty. I don't want that to ruin other people's races at all. Especially when some of those people may be competing for real tangible things. I don't like being a Mac marker in general. Especially when it's out of my control. And I'm not even racing with, like, 19th. When 19th is 30 seconds ahead of me because I have to delete 45 seconds penalty or else it just keeps on going up. I'm not doing it anymore. Alternate account, I'm only B class on that, so I'm fast enough where I can recover from stupid penalties or maybe just ignore them altogether. And just have it go up to where it's 2 minutes of penalty by the time I finish a race, but at least I get to race with first or second or something like that. I don't know, I'll see it as it goes, but for now I'm done with the main account. It's just too stupid to warrant me continuing. Will it be fixed? Probably not. But if by some miracle it does, I may go back to racing a full schedule. But as of now, I'll just say I'm sort of kind of, I don't know, best example would be Michael Waltrip, I guess. I race the races I want to race because I feel like I'm putting my time trying to deal with the full schedule. And there's a lot of stuff that I've had to part-time schedule, and I think this sort of warrants me doing it as well. It's not fun anymore, doing it the way it is. The all-in-all point of video games is to be fun. Yeah, this game is probably up there for the most there is in terms of a competitive aspect. But the penalties make it to where it can't be fun. And if everyone else gets a penalty, it can't really be all that competitive. Because it's just penalty roulette. When I get a penalty, it ain't fun. When everybody gets a penalty, it ain't competitive. And I'm not dealing with that anymore. Takes out the two main aspects of a racing game. Fun and competition. There's no point continuing with it, is there? And that ain't worth yeehaw. But maybe I'll have some fun with the alternate account, and it will be there. There'll be a little bit more spectating left for the main account. Hopefully there'll still be quite a lot with the alternate account. But for now, this is this, and this is hopefully better, just doing it in a different way in the future. Blah blah. It ain't a yeehaw. It ain't a downright negative, because maybe I can be positive with the other account. Blah blah.